Hello, hello. Welcome to Call and Response. I'm Baron Vaughn.
And I'm Open Mike Eagle.
I got to be honest. I almost said I'm Open Mike Eagle. I
Why were
was
you gonna do that? With that's not your name.
because I was anticipating you saying it, so I was thinking about you saying it. So my brain was
Oh,
like, switch gears. You know how brains work.
that's true.
My frontal lobe and my Lisa lobe kind of had to interact right there. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing mostly okay. I'm a little sad face emoji
Why are you sad faced emoji?
because we're this is the last episode of our show.
This is the last episode of our show. Did you know that we had to go? I don't know why
That's
I
good. Who is
went
that?
into
Is that Al Jarreau? Who is that?
it was a little Billy Ocean,
I see Billy
but
Ocean.
if I were to get louder, it would go full James Ingram. That would
I
have been my
see.
where he always has that growl.
Yeah, little Teddy Pendergrass.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah. Ow. Okay, I'm so sorry for everyone's ears. Thank you for coming to our last
People's
show.
ears love you, and I won't hear anything otherwise.
You won't ear anything otherwise. I said
Okay.
that specifically just to get people to stop loving me. I've got problems, but you're right, Mike. This is our last episode of the show. Wow. We have learned a lot. Do you think you've learned a lot, Mike?
I think I've learned a ton, and I've also just been amazed. I think like that's the main emotional takeaway for me is
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, I've been a part of a few different. We can't quite call this television, but a few different, video productions, and I've never seen anything come together this fast and have this caliber of people displayed on it, and this caliber of conversation, and just some of the ideas presented and some of the topics we've gotten to discuss
Mm-hmm.
and the
Yeah,
people we've been able to discuss it with. To imagine 3 weeks ago that at this point we would have had these conversations, it was unimaginable to me.
absolutely. I absolutely agree with you. And, that speaks to one of the reasons that I wanted to do this. I've said it many times. Selfishly, I'm becoming smart. Like I'm becoming smarter by talking to all these great people. And, you know, I have gained a lot of knowledge myself. Here's a weird comparison. Did you ever listen to WTF? You did. You were on it too, right?
Yeah,
Mark Maron's
absolutely.
podcast.
And I was a big fan of it before I ever got a chance to be on it, so I listened to
As
a
was
bunch.
I. As was I. I stopped listening to it because Mark Maron is kind of he hypnotizes you into thinking you're him, and so because he's it's true he's so good at like displaying saying exactly what's happening in his head that I started to believe that was what was in my head. So I'm like, you know what, this is dangerous, and I stopped listening to the podcast. But the thing that I liked the most about the podcast, and I don't even know if people notice this, I heard Mark Maron become a slightly better person
Right.
as it went on, as he talked to people who were outside of his own frame of reference, outside of his own frame of experience. And I think that that is one of the things that we have gotten to do here. We've talked to a lot of different people who have a lot of amazing things to say. And obviously, a big question, for us, as I would assume for anybody that has been watching the show, is what is next?
Right.
Where do we go from here? Okay,
I
we
think
we had these conversations. We're learning this knowledge. There's like this kind of almost everyone's inside. So I feel like white people are engaged in a mass education experiment right now for themselves, right? I feel like I have never seen white people talking about this. I remember this Chris Rock interview from forever ago. It was Entertainment Weekly or something, and the question that was posed to him was something to the effect of like, speak to black people having progressed, like how far black people have come, something like that, right? And Chris Rock said, "Oh, black people haven't progressed. Black people have always been amazing. It's white people that have progressed. It is white people who have gotten better at seeing us as full human beings. We've always been full human beings. We've been here doing this stuff the entire time." And I thought that that was such a beautiful way to describe that it's not that like, oh, black people are doing better. It's that the people who are, if you will, keeping us in our place, for lack of a better term, are learning how not to do such
But
things.
what's an interesting byproduct of that,
Yes.
in the oppression you describe,
Mm-hmm.
is that it stops us in a lot of cases from being able, as it, like in mass, to look at the things we've gone through and
Mm,
actually process them. Since the culture at large usually doesn't want to have the conversation with us, we usually don't have the space to actually take stock
mm,
of the pain, take stock of the scars, and to
mm-hmm.
try to actually heal them. So I do think we are being allocated more space to do that, which is good.
Mm.
One thing that I've gotten from these conversations is I feel like there's a lot of tools to take forward. So if you ask what's next, for
Yes.
me, it's like being more mindful of the processes internal to me and outside.
Mm-hmm.
It's being more being more mindful of ways to be active
Mm.
and remembering that I am a part of a community. I often feel very isolated and that I'm dealing
Mm-hmm.
with all of these things in my own mind only and just seeing social media and people talking about things.
Mm-hmm.
But a big component of this show to me was understanding all of the different ways to be involved and
Yes.
to feel a sense of a community belonging and have tools to engage with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you said that so beautifully, and that actually kind of leads us into our first guest. Um, I'm actually very very happy. I don't want to say I'm actually like what would be usual is that I would be very unhappy that this person is here, but that is not the case. I'm very happy. No modifiers. I'm very happy to have this person on the show. Um, I stumbled upon her work. My wife or partner or wife partner, or as I like to call her, wifey P.
That's a
She
great rap name.
is great. It's a great rap name, exactly. And that's she does rap in a sense in our house to me about my problems, and I've learned so much from listening to it, and that is not sarcastic in any kind of way. And even that is not sarcastic in any kind of way. And that's not ironic or facetious. Anyway, the thing about this first guest is my wife showed me her work, and I've been thinking a lot about it because, I stumbled upon it right when, for lack of a better term, the shit was going down. You know what I mean? People were starting to hit the streets. The first thing I wanted to do was check in with my people. I slowly, as I was processing and working on stuff on my own, was checking in with Black people in my life to see how they were doing, how we were doing. You know what I mean? Where people were, what people were thinking, how people were feeling. Some people were out there in the streets. Some people we talked on the phone. Some people we texted. Some people we emailed. Like I wanted to, because it helps me process to
Right.
kind of talk to people. And so my wife showed me our first guest work, and she has created something called the social change ecosystem, right? And it has all of these ideas of what kind of role you can play, right, to take part in social change. And everyone I was talking to, that was a big theme, is like, I don't know what to do, besides
Right.
protest, besides write my congressman or whatever, besides these things that are getting shared left and right, what to do, what else is there to do? And some people also feel like, a friend said, I'm ill prepared for the revolution. He said he's in Atlanta, right? And I was like, oh, that's interesting because, appearance wise, it seems that like protest, like being in the streets is the only way. And that is not true, right? There's many ways. And this is the first person I had seen talk about these ways and the ways that they work together. So please welcome, this is a very long intro, to the show, a writer. She is a lawyer and racial justice advocate, and she is the creator of the Social Change Ecosystem Map, and she is the host of the Solidarity is This podcast. Please welcome to the show, Deepa Iyer.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Yes, happy to have you.
Very happy.
Very, very happy to have you. So we have a how are you doing first? Let me just ask you that. How are you feeling today? Just in general.
I'm doing okay. I'm hanging in there. How are you both?
I think you said exactly how I feel.
I actually love that answer.
Hanging in
fact.
there.
I think there's a thing that we have inside of us sometimes that we want to just say the nice answers so
Yes,
that
the
we can
nicety.
continue with conversation. But I think the answer is hanging in there. The answer is that it's a little bit of a struggle right now, and it's great that you acknowledge that.
Yeah, I learned that in college to say the nice thing instead of actually answer that question because people were like, "Whoa," and I was like, I'll see a therapist." But I wanted to throw this graphic up on the screen if we can. Can we throw up the social change ecosystem map here, please? Okay, there it is. Now at the top it says mapping our roles in a social change ecosystem. Now in the middle you can see here maybe, and these are things that you can go to Deepa's Twitter, you can go to Deepa's website to see. In the middle it says equity, inclusion, liberation, justice, solidarity, resiliency, interdependency. Do any of those words interest you? They interest me. And around there's little paths, if you will, to bubbles that go in a circle. I'll read them one at a time, but not just yet. I want to go back to Deepa and talk with her about what is that? What am I looking at? Where did this come from?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to what you said, that there are times, I think, especially now, where a lot of us can feel very overwhelmed or we can feel numb. I know that even though I've been working in social change work for like 20 years, there have been so many times over the past 4 years in particular that I've been on the seesaw, feeling really outraged at what's happening or really numb and just going back and forth. And so that's how this emerged, one of those seesaw moments where I couldn't figure out what my role was. And so this is sort of an evolution, what you're seeing right now over the last couple of years, of me thinking about how do we not think about our jobs or titles, but really what our roles are, and how do we align them with our values and our purpose around social change, with justice or solidarity. And how do we also recognize that we're connected to other people, right? That we're not isolated, we're not alone, and that there's an ecosystem around this. So that's really what this mapping framework allows people to do. And I think it's resonated with folks in this moment because a lot of folks are feeling this sense of wanting to do something, wanting to get out there, but also feeling overwhelmed, unsure, uncertain as well.
How did you go about parsing out the specific roles? I mean, I know Baron's going to get into the specifics of them in just a moment, but I'm wondering, did you have to spend time with a bunch of different organizations and kind of do research in that way to generate the list of roles and understand what the functions are?
Well, I think some of it is just having been part of social change organizations for 20 plus years and recognizing that a lot of us show up in these different ways, but not just in an organization, right? It's also, I think, it could be like a campus setting, a workplace, a faith group, that we all show up in different ways. And so understanding how we show up, the ways in which they're connected to these kind of values and principles, and what it means to be interconnected as well. I think that that's really the core of it. So instinct, research, and just kind of living it and experiencing it and watching other folks do it too.
Fantastic. I wanted to bring up the map again, if we can, because I wanted to go through all of these different roles with you right quick, because it's so fascinating, and I kind of wanted to get into a couple. Of course, not all of them.
Yep.
You actually have programs that you do, like lectures, classes, et cetera, that you do, that people can kind of come to your website to find out more about, and we'll link people to that. But I want to read every single one and the statement that follows it. So these are all the different roles, right? And each statement that you've written with these roles is an I statement. It is basically like a mission statement. So I'll read each of these, because I like to read things out loud, because words have power, and to hear them is very different than to just read them. Here we go. The roles. Weavers. I see the through lines of connectivity between people, places, organizations, ideas, and movements. Experimenters. I innovate, pioneer, and invent. I take risks and course correct as needed. Frontline responders. I address community crises by marshaling and organizing resources, networks, and messages. Visionaries. I imagine and generate our boldest possibilities, hopes, and dreams, and remind us of our direction. Builders. I develop, organize, and implement ideas, practices, people, and resources in service of a collective vision. Caregivers. I nurture and nourish the people around me by creating and sustaining a community of care, joy, and connection. Disruptors. I take uncomfortable and risky actions to shake up the status quo, to raise awareness, and to build power. Healers. I recognize and tend to the generational and current traumas caused by oppressive systems, institutions, policies, and practices. Storytellers. I craft and share our community stories, cultures, experiences, histories, and possibilities through art, music, media, and movement. Guides. I teach, counsel, and advise using my gifts of well-earned discernment and wisdom. It is a damn poem, Deepa. It is a poem.
Well, you did that really well. I need to get a clip of that and use that in all of my workshops.
I will totally donate I have a whole sound setup. I will donate it to you for your use in perpetuity. This is beautiful stuff, and it's really interesting to consider. And the only two things that I know for sure are, I should say, one, no one is just one thing at any given time. And two, it changes with age. There's like a spectrum.
So true.
Like sometimes when you're younger, you're some of these, and as you get older, you become these other things. So I think there's a spectrum to which ones you are as you age and get more knowledge and your priorities change in your life. Those are the only two things I know for sure. The rest of it, I'm gonna let Mike ask you a question about, well, whatever he was gonna ask you anyway, or which ones of these stick out to you that you want to hear about, Mike.
Well, to me, when I look at these roles, they're all very familiar to me through, like you said, all different walks of life, not just the social change I'm involved in. But when I think about, like, I'm a rapper, when I think about the community of musicians that I belong to, you see these roles there too, not only with the artists themselves, but with the people who work with them and for them and help bring their visions out for people. And in that community, I do see all these roles, but I see, like, let's say in music, for instance, I see visionaries more than I might see organizers. And it feels like in that community, we need more organizers. And I'm wondering, in the arena of social change, are there roles that are rarer? Are there roles that kind of need more numbers in order to bring things into balance on that side?
Great question.
Yeah, and it is such a good question because it also, I think, connects to this idea that we're part of an ecosystem and that it is not just a singular role that is played. I think in the social change movement, historically, we've seen a lot of folks who see themselves as frontline responders or disruptors, right? These are folks who are going to be protesting. They're going to be ready to speak truth to power in some way, shape, or form. And they're going to shake up the status quo. And it's really important that we highlight those folks because they're taking the risks that many of us might not be able to. I think that what in the social change world we need more of are actually a recognition that there are a lot of guides and weavers, right, in our midst. Whether these are historic figures that we can learn from, our ancestors, or whether they're people right here, right, who can, as in the case of a weaver, make connections between different movements. So what is, for example, defund police have to do with abolish ICE? What are the intersections that we can make there, right? Or with guides, for example, these are people who have this ability to discern and can actually show folks who are maybe newly woke how to move about social change movements. There's a lot of cancel culture and call out culture, which can be really toxic in social change movement spaces too, right? And so I think guides can often show us the importance of coming from a place of love and compassion and grace and humility that's really important too. So those are just a couple of examples. And I would say that, particularly as a non-Black person of color, I've seen how non-Black people of color have been able to kind of map themselves in terms of using this framework to say, well, how can I be in service to defending Black lives, right? To the movement for Black lives. I shouldn't be a frontline responder necessarily, right? But how can I be a caregiver? How can I disrupt anti-Blackness in my own communities? How can I be a storyteller to identify perhaps similar threads of oppression that are not the same, but that there are some strands that bring us together as communities of color in this country who face white supremacy? So those are also different ways to look at this map, and particularly in this moment, if you're a non-Black person of color as well.
Thank you.
Woo. I just love this work. I think it's so interesting, and I think it's so important. I wanted to ask, did you get a chance to familiarize yourself with myself or Open Mic at all before you came on this interview?
I did, yeah.
Oh yeah. So did you get a chance to listen to any Mike's music or see some of the stuff that he's created?
A little bit. I have a 10-year-old, so time is
of the essence. No, I understand.
Totally.
Trust me. Trust me. I get it. I guess I was just curious to what your impression of Mike would be.
Oh.
Like which of these roles?
Of the mapping?
Huh? What are you saying? Based
in
on
terms of the map?
Yes. Like
based on my 5 minutes of communication and background research that I did.
Of course, yeah, background research. No.
I think you and Mike should kind of identify your own roles, because part of the whole mapping exercise is to map yourself, right, and then map out your ecosystem. And I also have a lot of reflection questions that folks can ask themselves, right, like around what is this role taking from me in terms of my capacity? Like, does it weigh on me, or does it make me shine? Right? What roles do I want to stretch into? Because am I playing sort of the same roles time and again? I mean, you mentioned earlier, Baron, that people switch roles perhaps because of age or context, but some people actually stay in the roles and feel stagnant, right? And so what are areas that you want to stretch into? So these are all questions that I think folks can ask themselves. So it's not just singularly mapping yourself, but using it as a way to get in right relationship with your values and with the rest of your ecosystem. So all that to say that I didn't answer your question.
No, but that is the answer, is that it is not for you to answer, right? That it is for us to kind of identify what we think and be intentional about what we do according to the roles that we identify, right? It can be kind of like almost like a guide sheet. I think you can put intentionality behind the one that interests you, like you were saying. Like if you have stagnated and you're like, well, what else can I do? And you can look at these options and figure out what that means to you, and put some intentionality behind it. And that's that's the little use I've gotten out of it so far, which has been a lot. But I did want to hear about one of these, because obviously, we're seeing a lot of actual protest in the streets. We're seeing a lot of that, in all of the cities across, the world, in many different ways. So that would fall under the disruptor title. Am I correct about that?
Yeah. So I think disruptors or frontline responders even.
So my question is, what are other things that fit into frontline responders or disruptors that aren't actually just actual protest in the streets? Do you see things that you would say that's disruptive that are not just like physical out there-ness?
Absolutely. So I think for disruptors, I think, as I was saying earlier, I feel like an experience or a situation where a non-Black person of color, like an Asian American like myself, right, is able to disrupt anti-Blackness or anti-Black sentiments, or to talk about anti-Blackness with my family, my uncles and aunties, right? That is an example of disrupting a set of experiences that sometimes exist in non-Black people of color communities. So that's a form of disruption that's not like necessarily being out on the streets, right? But it is also valuable because it's about disrupting a state of mind, a way in which folks have perceptions of Black people in this country, right? So that's one example. I think for frontline responders, again, it doesn't have to be on the streets, right? It could actually be in your workplace or on your college campus. How are you actually taking the institution to task, right? So if you're on a college campus, it's a little hard now because I know we're all sheltering in place, et cetera. But if you are connected to an institution that has uplifted a legacy of white supremacy and oppression and anti-Blackness, that has perhaps, statues and buildings named after slaveholders, a frontline responder or disruptor could be someone who actually calls that out and takes the institution to task. So those are just examples of how you can do the work in alignment with your principles, and yet not necessarily have to be on the streets, which is obviously in of itself extremely valuable and powerful. But for those who don't feel ready to do that or able to do that, especially in this moment of a pandemic, those are different ways in which you can still disrupt or be a frontline responder vis-a-vis taking your institution to task, for example.
I'm going to ask you a question that is admittedly weird, and you may not have an answer for it at all. It is merely reflective of how my brain works. But I like to think about systems a lot. And the way that I think about the system that we live in right now is that it's not necessarily an accident that we ended up in the society in the shape that it is. I know for instance, that there's people who have a lot of money who organize think tanks to think about policy and how it can shape things. And we live in the results of a lot of that. And so I'm wondering, since, this map has been organized in a way to support those that want to achieve change, positive change, that I would agree. I'm wondering, for the people who oppose positive change, for the people who want things to stay how they are or possibly even get worse, do they also use these similar type of roles to hold things back?
Are you saying do hate groups use these roles?
Basically, hate groups, conservative groups. I mean, not that those are one and the same, but I'm wondering if people who organize that want the opposite of racial justice, do they organize with these same kinds of roles?
That's really a provocative question that I have not thought about. I will say that I don't think it's surprising that a lot of conservative groups actually have used the language and tools of social change organizing to build up their own, like you said, institutions or their ideas and beliefs, right? That may be odious to all of us, but that they do often organize. That's how they build their power too. They just organize differently than we do. So I suppose that it is possible to use a model like this to implement, those sorts of beliefs and value systems. I think that this ecosystem mapping, though, likely more appeals to folks like us who are really connected to, those values that Barron read out earlier that are in the middle circle around liberation and solidarity and equity and justice. And who also, I think, see ourselves connected to a community. And I'm not sure that oftentimes, those hate groups, as you said, see themselves connected to communities beyond the ones that just talk in the same way, right, or believe in the same way. I think this map has the potential to bring in people that aren't necessarily, nonprofit professionals or people who you kind of say are the spokespersons of a movement. This allows folks who don't have those titles or roles or jobs to still play a role in social change in their neighborhoods or their faith groups or their college campuses or what have you. So I think those are some of the distinctions. But I hear your point, and I'll be thinking about that more.
I would like to submit that I definitely think that it is a possibility. I can definitely think of visionaries, for instance. This is how people might describe a certain person that espouses a very hate-filled speech that people go, that person is articulating my beliefs, and that I'm going to now organize with that person to execute X, Y, Z, and, the rest of the other alphabet that we don't have letters for. And have you seen the movie Black Klansman by Spike Lee, Deepa, at all?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So one of the funniest things in that movie to me is a depiction of what I would call a caregiver. I nurture and nourish the people around me by creating and sustaining a community of care, joy, and connection, who was the wife of one of the Klansmen, who very much in bed at night, they talked about their fantasy of killing Black people. And it was like such a, to me, hilarious depiction of the kind of emotional support that those people have to give each other. And I was like, wow, I've never seen anything like that before. And it was funny to me because it's kind of it's a corruption of something that's it's a corruption of love. Their love is based on hate. That's what I saw in that scene.
Yeah, and they appropriate some of the language and tools that we use that are coming from a genuine place, right, to achieve extremely reprehensible aims. But I believe in the end that we will win.
Oh, yeah. One last question, and I will see you again soon because I will be taking your classes. I will be signing up for lectures and workshops for sure. So yeah, the last thing I wanted to ask you is about a tweet that you had wrote the other day because
that's never good.
Yeah. I saw this and I was like, time for gotcha time. Gotcha time with Deepa. Here we go, cracker the knuckles. Something I used to do, a practical joke I used to do, Mike, when I was in like middle school, I used to take raw macaroni to school in a little plastic bag, and then I would put it in my mouth and I would just pretend like I was cracking my knuckles and chomp down on the macaroni.
Oh my gosh.
You should have saw the face on anyone who was near me. Just kind of like, what's happening? And that's just because I fan of Bruce Lee. And, before any fight, he cracks all of the muscles or bones that he has. Okay, here's what you tweeted. Is it not true, Deepa Iyer, on the day of June 22nd, 2020, in the hour of 1:02 p.m. Pacific, 13:02 military time? Is it not true that you tweeted, I came to Octavia Butler later in life, but her words, vision, and sheer force of will have had an indelible effect on me. Read her work, ! Hashtag Octavia paved the way. Octavia Butler has come up a couple times on the podcast recently. She's one of my favorite writers. And I think that one of the things I like about her work is how she artistically displays a lot of the roles that you are talking about here in some of her work.
That's amazing.
Right. And Dawn, I'm thinking of Dawn in particular, which was the first book I read by her. And I encourage everybody out there to read it. So I just kind of wanted to ask you what Octavia Butler means to you and what you think of her work.
Well, first of all, I'm really glad it wasn't today's morning tweet, which was about Lizzo. So
that's a friend of the show, by the way.
Okay. Well, it was a good tweet. Octavia Butler's, somebody who I think has been a guide for so many people, speaking of her role on the map, and a visionary who I think in all of her work sort of presented this vision of what it means when you are connected to history and your ancestors, and what it also means when you're a bridge to those who come after you. And so I found her work to be so powerful in kind of holding that vision, and also in many ways teachable, right? I have learned so much just about even the moment that we're in and what could come after just by reading her works. So, Parable of the Sower, Kindred, Dawn, there's so many books that I think speak to that vision. So she's somebody that I have really learned from and am continuing to learn from. And so, yes, please read her works. And read Adrienne Marie Brown's Octavia's Brood, which also, is a way of other authors envisioning Octavia Butler's work as well.
Fantastic. Yeah. We had Roxane Gay on the show the other day, and she also wanted to talk about Octavia Butler and other Afrofuturist thinkers who offer us visions and ideas of how things could work and look and be. And it is a beautiful thing to imagine.
Yeah.
Mike, anything last thing you want to say to Deepa?
Um, I just thank you for this work that you do. I think one of the most important things that we often don't keep front of the mind is how we have to constantly analyze the work we do in order to understand how to make it more efficient and how to bring about the results that we're trying to bring about. I mean, if we, because obviously it's 2020, we can't organize the exact same way we've been doing since the civil rights era because the goals change. So it's so important to analyze
Mm-hmm.
and constantly think about the work we're doing. And so I just wanted to tell you I appreciate the level of thought you're bringing into this because I think there's a lot that we can take from it going forward.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate both of you and really appreciate being in this space. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. That's Deepa Iyer. She has the Solidarity Is This podcast. Follow her on Twitter at DVIYER. We are going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with a friend who's very black.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
And we are back. I took off my sweater.
You
Shit
did.
was too high.
Changed your clothes.
I did.
You had a wardrobe change on a live stream, man. You're amazing.
I had a wardrobe malfunction, and the malfunction was that I put on that much wardrobe
I hear that. I hear that.
in the first place. So what you think about that conversation that we had with Deepa, man?
I think that's another guest who literally I could have spoken to for another 2 or 3 hours. I had so many more questions, but it's just because the subject matter is so rich and so applicable to everything that we're doing right now.
Absolutely. But that's why, luckily, she's out there. You know, like I said, I'm not even joking. I'm taking these classes. I want to learn more about that, be able to articulate it for myself,
That's
you know,
what's up.
and then bring that to people I care about. Speaking of people we care about,
Yeah.
we got a guest that's going to come in right now. This next person coming to the stage, oh my God,
You
it's
can't
crazy.
help it. You can't help it.
It's a muscle memory because I see her face and I'm holding the SM58. Y'all, look at this.
Look at him.
This is the SM58. This is the patron saint of stand-up comedy, the Shure SM58. If you've held one of these for an hour, you might be knowing what you doing. The SM58, stand-up comedies, open mic, and everywhere you go. So holding this mic and seeing her face on the screen makes me feel like I'm at a show. I'm at a show. That's what's weird. But this next person, this next comic coming to the stage is that dude in the sense that they're one of the best I've ever seen. I hate how good she is. And she was that good when I first saw her. All she's done is gotten better.
Absolutely.
And that shit is annoying. You may have seen her on her own Netflix special. She is also a writer on Black Monday on Showtime. Please welcome to the stage the homie Janelle James.
Yay, Janelle.
Hey,
What up,
I'm
family?
Black, y'all. I'm black,
That's-
y'all.
ooh.
Black it black
that's-
because I'm black, y'all.
Hey,
I'm black,
hey,
black.
hey.
Oh man, seriously. CD4.
That's who you were introing, right? As a black person. That's me, right?
It is you. It is you. Yes, it is.
That's an excellent intro. Thank you so much. I love when men compliment me.
we gotta have a talk about people who's so good it hurts one day. You know what I mean? I have that too in music. People who's so good it just get on your nerves. You know?
Oh yeah. Can you give a shout out right now?
I mean, well, you know, Kendrick.
yeah.
He's pretty good. It's a little
He's
annoying
pretty damn
sometimes.
good.
You know
It
what I
is.
mean?
Yeah. I
That's
get that.
Michaela Cole for me. The writer, actress, Michaela
yeah.
Cole from Chewing Gum. I hate her gut. She's so good.
Yeah, she now has a new show on HBO. I think like
Yes.
I May Destroy You. Have you watched it yet?
Yes, it's excellent. It's very heavy, but she's so good. And I don't especially right now, I'm not looking for heavy things, but she's so good. It's excellent. Yeah.
Yo, good story is a good story, heavy or not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if it's done well, it'll lift something off you. That's the point of something that's supposed to be heavy.
I ain't been looking at a lot of heavy stuff either, though. I can look at heavy stuff that's old. Like I can look at, I can look at a Spike Lee movie that's
like comfort heavy.
Yeah, comfort heavy. That's
comfort
it. Like a big ass blanket. Comfort heavy. That's what I'm zooming or dialing into. But
like what's going to happen to Radio Raheem.
Yes.
But
right, A Boys in the Hood, A Menace to
yes.
Society. I could do that. No current shootings, please.
Yeah. For real.
Shootings from back then.
Yeah.
When we were so chill, we stayed in the car while we shot. That's how we did it.
Exactly.
Oh, that's hilarious. So Janelle, what you been up to? You just seem like you're doing everything all the time. Where are you, by the way?
I am on the East Coast. Exact location undisclosed.
Which part of the East Coast? Up, middle, or bottom?
Shit. Middle.
Okay. I don't know if that's you don't want to tell me, or if you're confused about
it's I have nut bags that follow me. It's cool.
Oh, yeah. I'm not trying to give away your location. It's just that everyone's everywhere,
Yeah, I was in LA and now I'm
you was here. You was in LA for a minute, right? Like when everything kind of went to hell, you was in LA.
I was, and we went up. I was working a job, a writing job, Central Park, Apple TV, and was supposed to eventually head back here, but not this soon, basically. And thought that my kids would be joining me in LA for the summer, and then everything, we went into quarantine, but people were still doing the elbow daps like it wasn't serious. And so I didn't take off as soon as I would have liked. And so I just got back to the East Coast about a month ago. And it was a horrible experience traveling right now. So I do not recommend it.
Ooh, tell me about it. Because of that show that you're working on, Central Park, Apple Plus. Just trying to say exactly the way you said it.
I don't get paid extra for saying it. But it's cool.
I know.
Once it's good.
But you seem to like working on it.
I mean,
Yeah, so you are just always doing shit. That's what I mean. Like you have been here and you've been getting writing jobs left and right. You had a lot of shit popping off. And when I think about people who were on the come up, that I'm like, damn it, Janelle James is one of those people. I mean, you've been doing comedy for a minute. You have always been good. You are the truth. If I've never told you that.
Keep it coming. Because I don't know if you know, I haven't had any applause in just the intro made me cry right there. When you said come to the stage, I'm like, goddamn, that's shooting into my veins.
Right? I know.
Because anyway, yes, I'm doing a lot of stuff, but I've always been like this. Even before I got into comedy, I'm just one of those people. I want to experience everything, and whatever industry I'm in at the moment, I want to do all parts of it. And that's why comedy is good, because you could just branch off in so many different directions, and it keeps my brain humming.
So, with how loudly you like to keep your brain humming and with all the activities you're involved in, what was it like having to slow down?
This has been actually, before I left LA, I hurt my back. So just, I am not only brain wise frenetic, but just motion wise. I always got to be doing something. So I left LA with a hurt back, got here. I'm immediately I'm gardening. I'm, I'm doing home renovations. I'm just always into something. So it's been very hard to sit down, and it's almost good that I hurt my back, because it's kind of forcing me to do that. But it's very difficult because life is short. And I feel like I'm one of those people I feel every second ticking by.
Ooh, it's a countdown for you, huh?
Yeah. I mean,
Damn.
So to get into everything that's happening, that's one of the bad things about racism for me, is because I always feel like life is so short, and having to think and deal with racism is taking away time for me.
Scientifically, that is true.
Yeah. I'm so mad that I have to waste my life minutes dealing with this shit.
Yes.
So that's how I'm affected most of all. I'm mad in that way.
Well, that's just the state of being, because we have to hold something that we didn't make. You know what I mean?
Then ask for it, just trying to chill and experience things and contemplate the meaning of life, but you can't even, so it really sucks.
That's my true belief. It's like everybody, when it comes down to it, just wants to chill, just wants to
Just
be
want to
okay.
chill.
You know,
Just want to chill.
anything that's in your way of doing that shit is oppression. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So it's like,
Yes.
that's what it is that like black people want to chill, women want to chill, black women want to chill, black
Right.
trans women want to chill. You know
Just
what I
wanna
mean?
chill. Exactly.
Just chill, kick your feet up and watch a little something and live a damn life and not have to hold the burden of what people assume about you.
Right. And I don't understand why racists don't seem to also want to chill. They spend so much time just wondering what we doing, hating us, wearing robes, ironing them, just the whole aspect that you have in meetings to hate. It's just crazy to me. It's not it does not make sense. Racism does not make sense to me.
But that's one of the ways that a lot of people specifically get tricked or emotionally manipulated into racism is because they get made to feel like race, other races are what's holding them back. So in that way, they think about that, so they never have to really focus on themselves or the realities of their situation.
Right. So and what are we doing while they thinking that? Chilling. You know what I mean? That's why it's so frustrating.
And then they start meeting going like, what are they doing? Are they chilling? Knew it, they're lazy.
Exactly.
It turns into that. But that scapegoatism is and some people think that it is a mental illness. That racism is a mental illness. Because look,
is it a learned mental illness, I guess?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. No. It's a form of abuse. If you can't teach someone to hate, the only way you can teach hate is to give that person hate.
Well, I don't know if you saw just recently, had a video of a woman on her Confederate flag truck, and she specifically told a protester, "I'm going to teach my grandkids to hate you." She said that. So, they know what they're doing.
Luckily her grandkids is on TikTok being black and Korean, so she ain't nothing grandma can do about that. Ain't nothing grandma can do.
But just in the way of saying that that's a mental illness, that's a very, very aware person and a very aware thing to say. You know what I mean? So I don't buy that whole angle.
No.
I'm mentally ill.
It's a choice. Not necessarily mental illness in the sense of that, like they have no control. I'm saying that it's kind of like it's a learned behavior that because it literally brings no value to the world.
So it's learned loser behavior.
Yeah,
because they're losers.
No, but that's exactly what it is that it's very hard to look around and go, I've been fucked. And it's much easier to go like, it was them than to look at yourself and try to pick yourself up. And that is a thing I think that racists they cannot do. It's easier to blame and to spend so much of their life hating for no reason than to be like, maybe I should do something for myself.
Right. I mean,
that's mental illness to me.
That would be, I can believe that. And it would be great if I could not be affected by that. You know what I mean?
Well, exactly.
I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, don't bring your loser shit over here is really what.
No, seriously. Really, I'm just saying I pity them. I pity the fool.
I don't even have the energy to pity. Stop wasting my time is how I feel about it.
Yeah, you know what it is. I really do understand that position too, because there's so much we want to do in the world and how hard we have to fight to do anything. You know what I mean? Especially in this business. Like, let alone to have to stop and worry about some people who hate us for no reason.
No reason. It's infuriating. And the fact that all we're doing is marching and burning a couple Wendy's is crazy to me. So it just shows how amazing Black people are, that we just been taking this shit on the chin, really, on some trying to educate, on trying to pity, on trying to understand. And we just, so.
But that overt racism like that, I hate you, is a large group of people, but I get very worried about the people who don't know that they hate me. You know what I'm saying? They've been taught their entire lives to hate me, and they have to figure it out for themselves how that figures into it too.
You said in your other segment that white people are getting a large education at this time. Now, the way I always think about it is, yes, they're getting an education, but it also proves that they've never given a thought to it, period, because it does not make sense that if I just sit and think about it for 2 seconds, that racism ended because of a war, and then Martin Luther King gave a speech, and then all of a sudden Black people were just afforded every opportunity that white people, like, that's what people believe. That means you've never given a real common sense thought to it.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So it's like I didn't know, but I did know, and I know I'm benefiting from it, and so I'm not going to investigate any further. So they're not getting the education; they're actually thinking about it now. Like, you know what I mean? And that's it. Also infuriating.
Well, because it's too soon to tell what it will mean. It's too soon to know if it means anything for real.
I mean, it's like Groundhog's Day. Every generation, you know, I've been watching. You know, you watch the old movies, and there's a march, there's riots. Things settle down. Then the 80s come. There's a march, there's riots, then things settle down. I mean, and this is, you know, unfortunately and fortunately, the best time to be Black in America, and it's still awful.
It's still the same. It's still in a lot of senses, it's still marching.
Yeah.
The racism just changes.
Right.
You know, so.
And that's the question, is what can be done about that, you know? And that's why I am not excited about somebody who's running for president or either of the bodies that are running for president, but I won't say those names right now, just because I don't. We'll talk about that some other time. What?
I'll talk about it whenever, but
talk about it right now. Talk about it. I'm bored. I'm bored with this person.
Of course, it's hard to get excited about a candidate who looks just like everyone else that's come before. Like, we started off with the most diverse, you know, tickets on the Democrat side ever, and then we're back down to an all white dude. So of course it's not.
It's like
something to be excited about, and it's a slap in the face to, like, we don't care about, not even optics. We don't care.
I just don't know why we are so married to. I'm just tired of the Democratic Party. I mean, really, because they're pulling some slapstick stuff, and I'm just kind of like, what? Again, it's to your point. It's just like there's a split in the Democratic Party. You know, the people who want the status quo and the people who want the status to quo away. Oh man, my brain didn't help me on that one. That was the worst. Quo away.
Well, I mean, what's happening that's good is that younger people are more civic minded now. I know when I was 18, I was not thinking about this shit. That was an idyllic time. That was idyllic time. But, you know, there's 18-year-olds protesting, but they still don't vote. And so that's why we keep getting these white dudes, because they know older people, such as my mother, they are status quo people, you know? So I feel like the Democratic Party, nothing happens without extensive research, polls, every move they make is based on people that they believe will vote. And until people figure that out, I know people, you know, especially younger people, are like, voting isn't a big deal. Like, I don't want to do it. But that's who, if we're still mired in this Democratic Party, that's who they're catering to. That whole kente cloth thing, that was directed to my mother's veins. Because if you had a problem with that, you have never had your church go over to the white church or had the white visitors and they gift them with the kente cloth and they, oh, that's so nice. And they talk about their sojourn in Africa and da-da-da-da-da. Like, that's what that was. That was for my mother and her generation. And guess what? My mother votes all the time, every time. Rain or shine. Hey, bars. Anyway, but
we talked a lot about you know, stuff that drains the energy, and I wanted to get a sense from you, just with everything that you got to fight in the industry, everything that's at you in society to drain your energy. Like, what do you do to re-energize? And I want to get that from you before we let you go.
Re-energize. I mean, I am not energetic, but just as a personality. But I mean, one thing with me is comedy is not my whole life. I think that's very important.
Yes.
I think, that's a lot of comics are very sad right now because that's been the case. They're like, I missed the stage. I missed people running out back to shows when Corona is straight up roaring,
risking their life for drink tickets.
And it makes me like, oh, that's the only thing you have to live for, which is sad. So that's how I re-energize. I just completely bail out of that shit and do some other stuff and live life, because that's what makes comedy good. You got to live the life to have shit to talk about.
Exactly.
And that's basically it. I just don't put all my eggs or feelings in one basket ever.
That's real.
Yes. Well, we gotta go.
Sorry, I wasn't funny.
No,
we were laughing the whole time.
Yes. But I just wanted to give you a shout out, because I think that you should be a big star. Like, if stand-up comedy was not shut down right now, like, Janelle James is doing so much, and she's seriously one of the best out there. So I hate that this is happening and that Janelle James is
I'll be
stand-up
back.
special.
Comedy ain't going nowhere.
I know.
That's real.
Neither are
Any
you.
comedians that's watching this, comedy ain't going nowhere.
No. Just be
chill out.
patient. Be
Just
patient.
chill out.
She's at Janelle J Comic on Twitter. Also, just Google her and watch all of her specials. Listen to her albums.
I'm old, so all my handles are different.
You got a lot of time right now. Change them up. Thank you very much for being here, Janelle.
Thank you, Miss J. For sure.
Yay. See you guys.
All right, take care now.
Oh, damn, Janelle. She's so damn good, so damn
the
funny
best.
all the time. Exactly. Okay. Well, we got one last guest. Any processing you need to do after Janelle?
Nah, it's interesting to hear how she processes. I think that last point she made about having a life outside of comedy is really important. I mean, it's really important for me to think about too, just in music. Like it's really difficult to make a living in music when you can't go to shows and you can't, do the things that you normally do to generate income. So it's important for me to think about too, like what is there for me in life outside of my profession? I think that's when we talk about things and thoughts to take forward, that's one for me,
Absolutely. But I think that the thing is that I totally agree with you. And I think that the thing is that there's too many people sometimes that are trying so hard to get into their respective industries that they forget that you have to have lived a life to have something to talk about. Just like Janelle said, you have to care about something to have something to talk about. Everything can't be comedy. Everything can't be your art. You have to live life to turn into art. You have to have something to say. And I think that our next guest will be able to have a couple things to say about that too. Do you want to introduce this person, Mike?
Well, I know him as an excellent writer. I've enjoyed his work. He's a poet, and he's the new editor of Gin and Mag, which is a project with Medium that I'm hoping to hear a lot about. And I do not correctly know how to pronounce his last name, so I will introduce him as Brother Hanif. Please welcome to the show, and then he'll educate me how to say his last name so I can be correct on that going forward.
I have a guess, but I want to hear it too.
Yeah, how's it going, y'all? It is pronounced Abdurraqib.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I was afraid to take a chance.
But I could also just be saying that's what I thought, but that is what I thought.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here. Appreciate y'all.
Yes,
yeah,
indeed.
man. I've been a fan of yours for a long time, and I'm excited to have you. I'm specifically interested in so many thoughts that I know you have about the current moment. And one of the things that I want to ask you about, just being a fan of your work, I know that you love music the way I love music. And when I look at the current moment, I feel like popular music is a little absent from it. In the role that popular music has played in protest eras of the past. I'm wondering if you agree with that, and if so, why you think that's the case.
Well, I do agree with that, but I also think that we're at a point where we maybe have progressed past the need, not for protest music, but for contemporary musicians to capital M make a statement, which I think is maybe tough for people to reckon with, but I don't feel any absence. Like when I'm out on the streets, like we're still playing old Nina Simone songs or old Kendrick Lamar songs or, and so I think the protest song has been braided through past decades in the American moment. And now there's something that maybe feels a little craven about it, and some of that is just because I think the current makeup of the pop culture landscape relies entirely on just countless rotations of people responding to moments and responding to moments and responding to moments, usually for great gain. And so I don't know if there's a way to make a protest song in a protest moment right now that feels genuine or that feels like it's coming from a place that is doing any work to actually serve the people or to motivate the people. But I mean, there are some. I mean, Lil Baby had a protest song that hit last week, and I think it was high on the charts. I don't pay much attention to the Billboard charts anymore, but it was like number 3 or 4 on the charts. But I don't know if that's going to live in the moment the same way. Like, even recency, This Is America, how that still kind of lives in the protest moment.
Yeah, as does Kendrick Lamar's All Right that kind of is
Yeah.
out there too. Yeah, I read this beautiful article that you wrote called "The Galvanizing Musicality of the Protest Chant," and it kind of speaks to what you were just talking about. And I guess I wanted to hear a little bit more about that. First of all, it's I read it out loud, and your words are so indelibly meant to be read and the said. So it's kind of like they pop on the page, and when I'm like saying it, I was like, this dude is a poet. But like, I kind of wanted to hear what connects with you about, I guess I want to say, the spirituality of the protest chant, like how it actually can wake people up. And I kind of want to hear a little bit about your thoughts on that energy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of multiple voices, the convergence of many voices to create one voice. Like, I think that act in and of itself is motivating for me. I didn't grow up in the church. I was raised Muslim, so I didn't grow up in a church, which I think maybe, but I piqued my interest around choirs, because even though I didn't grow up in the church, I grew up around church music, or I grew up hearing the way choirs had been utilized in Black choirs specifically have been utilized on past records and in samples and all these things. So there's something that I really think is galvanizing about the sonic quality of many voices from many corners converging to create one sound. And that is a kind of propelling factor for me. I think, to kind of be in the street and hear that is one thing, but also the thing that I really love is, for me, I'm in Columbus, Ohio, where I'm born, raised, live, and there've just been kind of like many places, there have been kind of countless actions happening. And there's something really propelling for me to pull up on an action and, even with my car windows up, be able to hear the people before I see the people, right? There's something really reassuring about knowing that my people are out in mass, even though I'm not there. Even when I'm on my way there, I can hear the street is kind of trembling with their voice.
I'm going to ask you a hypothetical, theoretical question that kind of starts with that as a base. Because, in reading that piece, it seems that the chant also takes on the characteristics of being energizing physically for the people involved in the protest. Like when they become physically exhausted from the march itself, a chant can kind of motivate them to keep pushing. And, theoretically, that makes me wonder, is there a similar mechanism for when we are like exhausted from trying to push like online? Do you know what I mean? If when we're exhausted from social media, like is there something that could serve the function that a chant serves when you're at a protest that would kind of serve the purpose of energizing and reminding us that we're part of something that's bigger?
Logging off and doing something else, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm someone who, to be real, is kind of always operating at a baseline of exhaustion. And has, for better or worse, probably for worse, has just come to accept that as a part of my routine, my work, both my work on the page and my work in the community I live in. It leads to a type of satisfying exhaustion. And so for me, yeah, I mean, half the time I'm online, I'm exhausted, but also, I think there are pockets of the internet that keep me there and keep me present. You know what I got really into just like watching archival concert footage, which is something, I mean, as someone who's a bit of like a music archivist, it's not all that surprising, but I think there's something about, finding, I'm a person who digs, I dig in the crates for records, and I dig for old footage. And there's something really great about finding like a gem, like finding a video of Al Green in like 1975,
right,
where he was just kind of like untouchable, or finding a video of like Aretha in the late 60s, like where someone is ascending to a level that no one else could touch. That kind of energizes me.
Gotcha.
That's fantastic. I wanted to ask you about your your thoughts on kind of like the long path, I guess, of art, the tradition of art as a way to be understood and to heard as well, because you are, you know, definitively a poet as well, right? So poetry is one of the forms in which you express yourself, and I guess I wanted to ask you about what you believe poetry is for you and how it kind of serves your purposes.
Yeah, I mean, a thing that I do want to say that I've has been saying a lot is that I sometimes think that my work as someone who is in the streets with my people in the city in whatever way, whatever form that takes, feels very separate from my work as a poet or a writer. Um, in in that, I think when I think about the many ways that people need me to show up in the city here, most of those ways are not as a writer. You know what I mean? Like most of those ways do not involve the things that I've written. But what I think that does for me is, it kind of frees me up for a poetic explanation or exploration that doesn't rely on the false understanding that my writing of a poem is going to change the world, which is something I think I maybe believed when I was younger, undoubtedly. But I think that there's been some freedom for me to explore themes, ideas, concepts, images that don't feel like they have to respond to the current moment. Because for me, my response in the current moment has to be something more urgent than a poem. But I do return to this idea that what that means is when I sit down to write and when I'm writing, there is a type of freedom unlocked in feeling like I can write more broadly. We're in a moment where all these editors at all these publications are emailing the Black writers they know and asking them to write about race. And undoubtedly, when this moment passes, will those same editors reach out to Black writers and ask them to write about a TV show they like,
right,
or an album they've been listening to? So I'm thinking about that too in terms of the quality and necessity of response.
In another piece I read from you, and this is in reference to the current moment, you describe what people mean when they talk about reopening the country post-COVID and returning to normalcy, and how for people, especially people in the Black community, we're in no hurry to do that. I thought the piece was really brilliant, and if you would, I would like you to unpack some of those things that you wrote about in that piece.
Yeah, I mean, I think I wrote that piece on, I think, around the first week of protests, or when the first week of protests had hit. And it seemed, a few things seemed important to me. One, when you had the folks protesting, largely the white folks protesting in front of state houses about wanting to go to restaurants and get their hair cut and all that, it seemed important to me at the time to not so openly mock the idea of a protest, right? Because it occurred to me that in America, there could be at any moment, there could be a reason that would pull me out to the streets.
Right.
And it felt important to kind of honor that. But two, that piece in particular, it seemed important to me to also think through how the reopening of America also means for some a return to a normal that is violent or untenable or outright unlivable, right? And so while you have one faction of protesters fighting to return to a normal that is livable or comfortable, there are another resisting a return to that normalcy because for them it is unlivable. Mm-hmm. And that also feels like a very American reopening for me. And I'd gotten lost in all this talk about quote unquote reopening the country. I'd grown so frustrated with it because there is a real human cost to that.
Right.
What we're saying, right? And there's an actual detailed risk that people are taking. Marginalized people, working class people, poor folks. There's actual human risk taken. And so when we reduce it to reopen the country, it sounds like you flick a switch and everything is back, right? But what is actually happening is that people are having to measure risk on their own, right? Because the government is not doing a good job of dissecting that for the people or taking care of the people so that they don't have to do this math where it's like, do I go to work today or do I stay home? I'm not feeling very well. Do I risk it? You know, like people shouldn't have to do that math on their own.
Yeah, that's incredible, and it points to a long tradition of, I guess, this gap that has been growing between employer and employee, which has just gotten wider and wider and wider, with employees having less and less of a voice and having to just accept what they're told from this very paternalistic voice. And those people are my mom. Just so people know who we're talking about. That's my mom. That's my sisters. That's my brothers. You know what I mean? I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Gen Mag.
I'm one of the editors.
Okay.
And my main role is to kind of bring in a small handful, usually 3 to 5 pieces per month, written by critics of color. And I took that role like last November, I think. And a big part of it, a driving factor, was that much like I just talked about, I wanted to be an editor who reached out to Black folks and folks of color, to write about things they were excited about and interested in, not just in a moment of racial uprising. You know what I mean? And I wanted to get the folks who wanted to write about K-pop, or the folks who wanted to write about some Netflix show they liked, you know? And so that was the kind of aim there. It was to see if some publication would give me a small corner to work with artists and writers that, and it was in part to give, you know, I've written a lot. My work has lived on the internet a lot. I've been very lucky, and I have a lot of gratitude for how my career has allowed me to move. And I think often about Toni Morrison, who is from the state I'm from, and who was very generous and eager to reject the idea of genius, because she knew that embracing the idea of genius is also to embrace the idea of scarcity. And so Toni Morrison often opened up paths where she could for other writers, for writers other than herself. And that was, you know, that's a constant goal of mine is, you know, undoubtedly I could write on the internet all the things I want to for as long as I am alive. But I think it would be more useful to, you know, talk my way into opening up space for other writers.
In your work a lot, I've seen you struggle with the complexity of certain ideas. And I mean, you write about your struggle with the complexity of those ideas. And I think that's important, because what that does is it gets into the nuance of complicated ideas. And I feel like that nuance is so important, especially when we're talking about trying to define what it means to be Black in America at a time unlike any other time before. There's a lot of nuance in that. And me being somebody who values that, it makes me want to ask you this. In a time when there's a lot of active protests going on, when people are, a lot of people who weren't previously aware of racial injustice that we've been yelling about for years are now being aware of it. And like you said, all of these editors and publishers are reaching out to Black writers to have something to say in this moment. Does it make it harder for you to write something nuanced in that moment when everybody, it seems, is going to want something loud?
It doesn't make it harder for me, but I think that I see a world where it is becoming harder for a lot of other writers. And I'm not saying it doesn't make it harder for me because I am better than other people. It doesn't make it harder for me because I think I've learned to embrace saying no in moments like this. But the ability to say no in a moment like this is a privilege. You know what I mean? And the ability to avoid writing directly into the moment is a privilege. And another thing too, for me, is that I've had to remind people that, you know, there was this moment a couple weeks ago or 3 weeks ago where it felt like, you know, everyone was like, well, here's a Black person you should follow on the internet. And then an influx of white folks would follow the Black person on the internet. And I think by default, they would imagine that that person's function was to make sense of America's ongoing racial tension, or to unravel the millennia of injustice that we're pushing up against. And I had no real desire for that. I had to remind people, ultimately, I think what folks are signing up for with me is, occasionally you might get some of that, but you're also going to get like a 20-minute rant on like an Alanis Morissette album, and because I'm a music critic. I mean, like I'm a poet and a music critic. And I say that to say that I think it never hurts for Black folks to find ways to reinforce the fact that they exist for more than just an answer box, or a solution box. And I'm not saying, undoubtedly there are some Black folks who want to serve that purpose, and I don't want to take that away from them. I'm just saying that for some of us, I believe it is a good time to insist that we have options to be our full selves, and not just exist to make sense of a moment that we did not create.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Fantastically spoken. And Hanif Abdurraqib, right?
That is right. Yep.
Yes. We believe in the tradition of shout outs here. And I just wanted to, because you seem like you are, you're a very intelligent and thoughtful man. So I'm curious as to some of your shout outs. I guess I want to hear names of poets, shows, or movies that you'd either like to recommend, or just things that you like that are that just bring you joy.
Alanis Morissette, it's your time to shine.
Yes.
There you go. Yeah, and it could be anything out of anything. Just shout outs you want to give.
I've been, June Jordan, the poet June Jordan, the poet Araceli Skirmay, the poet Robert Hayden. Those are all folks I've been sitting with a bit. And shows, it's funny. So last year I had 2 books come out, and I was on the road for most of the year. I did like 74 readings last year or something like that. And this is a lot. And so I didn't watch a lot of television. I'd watch sports and that's about it. But since March, since being in the house, I've watched maybe too much television, because it's all new to me at this point. And so I will say the show Money Heist was the most enjoyable thing I've seen maybe in my life.
Wow. Okay.
It was incredible. And I've watched, I've been like revisiting old shows that I've loved, but only watching them in small bursts. But also making I guess I could shout out making playlists. Making playlists has been a part of my routine as of late, and it's been really good to do that work and take it seriously. There's nothing like immersing yourself in the work of making a playlist, because it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of care, and it takes a lot of thoughtfulness and generosity.
I have one more question for you. And I've read some of your work, and I don't know a ton about your upbringing, but I imagine you grew up in a hood somewhere. Would that be accurate?
That is accurate. Yeah, I grew up on the east side of Columbus, Ohio.
Okay, word. One thing that I do see in your writing, and it speaks to what I was talking about in terms of you writing about struggling with the complexities of a concept, is that there's a real vulnerability there to talking about your own thought processes, and talking about your uncertainty around things. And I know, coming from a hood, and I know from a lot of other people's experiences growing up in hoods, the vulnerability is not a thing that that is encouraged by those environments very often.
Ooh.
So I'd like to know from your perspective, like, what has given you the strength to be so vulnerable? And well, if I think just starting from there would be great.
Yeah, I think that in some ways the hood I grew up in encouraged vulnerability, and I just wasn't aware of it at the time. My mother passed when I was 13, so my mother passed when I was kind of like on the doorway to my first act of adulthood, and I was very close to my mother, and my mother was a roadmap for vulnerability for me for a long time. And I think I lived a part of my life where I didn't imagine that vulnerability was the work of straight cisgender men. But it's because I wasn't seeing how it was playing out in my everyday life with my friends in the hood I grew up in. These people who had known me since I was, 8, 9 years old. And the people who would, it is an act of vulnerability is also, if you see your homie getting in a fight, sliding in between the people, throwing the fists and the people protecting themselves.
Right.
Right. That's a level of risk. That's an act of vulnerability. And to detach it from violence, it's also an act of vulnerability to, if your homie takes an L, to walk them home and like be the person who gets the ice for them and puts it on their, like stuff like that. There's actual vulnerability in the tensions that I was immersed in when I lived in my neighborhood. It's vulnerability to know that your homeboy does not have a good jump shot, but still pick him like second to last so that he doesn't get picked last. You know what I mean? All these things, the things that
that's hilarious.
The things that the things that I think that my friends and I masked in this kind of kinship, of growing up in a place that was neglected, was really setting a blueprint for vulnerability in my life. Now, undoubtedly too, this is also to say that for a lot of my life, even though my mother passed, I grew up with Black women and around Black women who just weren't with am I allowed to cuss on here? I don't know.
Yes, go for it.
Okay, I was going to say, who weren't with the shit, you know what I mean? Like, who weren't gonna who just weren't gonna stand for someone who would become hardened and careless with how they treated the world. And so that is important to me too. And so, yes, I think when I was younger, I did not imagine those things as the hood teaching me vulnerability. But when I look back now, I think, well, that's the blueprint for how how it is, how in my work it is easier to say these things and not very anguished I don't feel a lot of anguish when kind of trying to go down that road.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, and also thank you for making sure I wasn't picked last. That really meant a lot. And
I got to see your jumper now, Baron. I got to see it.
It got better because I was given some confidence. You know what I'm saying? Hanif Abdurraqib, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, y'all.
I appreciate you so much, man. Please keep rocking, and we'll keep consuming it as it comes our way.
No doubt. Appreciate you.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that was fantastic. Hanif Abdurraqib, everybody. I mean, unplug, right? That's a big thing that he's talking about there.
Yeah, it's an important thing to do that I will admit I am trash at. I am the worst, one of the worst unpluggers there is. That's funny. I've ended up asking a few of our guests a similar question about how they, process things and maintain their sanity, and they all answer unplug, and I'm always like, I never thought of that, because I never do,
Well, but that's why we get to talk to all these people,
Right.
because they're going to say everybody who has been on this fantastic show, of which this is the final episode, they have given us a lot to think about. We've become smarter, right? Like I was talking about before. So I don't know. How you feeling, man? Like, this is it.
The end of season one.
The end of season
the
one.
End of
yes.
season one. I feel like we've had just a series of amazing conversations.
Gaggle is a very good grouping word.
With incredible people. And, I find myself just sitting and chewing and processing on so much of it. I feel like this has been very helpful for me as an individual to deal with all of the things that we've been dealing with, and just hearing about how other people have processed things. And that's not just, around the racial injustice that we're experiencing or the protests that we're having, but even people sitting still through the lockdown and how we've been able to really get at how people have dealt with that. All of that's been very informative for me, and it's stuff that I'll, take forward into my life, and hopefully stuff we can pick back up on in another season of this.
Definitely. And then the best thing is that everything that we recorded here is everything we recorded here. It will live on both Funny or Die's and Blavity's platforms, so you can go and watch full episodes, you can watch clips, you can watch specific interviews. There's all kinds of different ways that you can watch this show again. I know I will, because I want to remember some things that were said.
Absolutely.
And
that's the one bad thing about us having these conversations, that we don't get to take notes during them.
Yes, but luckily the internet did. And I was curious, Mike, what are some of the things that you feel like you're walking away with right now after all these different interviews? Like any memorable moments, any I go on this is like a clip episode, except of course we don't have that much time. I'm like, out of all the interviews, Mike Eagle, all that 2, maybe even 3 interviews or points that were made that resonated.
I mean, I really,
to your call.
I dug today's conversation with Hanif Abdurraqib a lot, because a lot of what these interviews are for me, it isn't necessarily just about the content of what a person says. It's also kind of watching them, how they are, like their personal gravity, how they process things, and how they speak, especially about these issues. And a lot of them radiate, especially, Hanif, Roxanne Gay, Bertunde, they kind of radiate this stillness that gives them the space to process things and have these insights that they share. And I hear all of that in their answers. And that is one of those things that reminds me to sit down, unplug, shut the fuck up, and think for a while.
Yeah, I think I see what you're talking about. I've seen a lot of people on this show who clearly know their self-worth.
Right.
Teach me how to appreciate my own. Like people like Morgan DeBon, people like CCH Pounder, like my good friend Uzo, like Phoebe, like Shy,
right.
Like, I mean, there's just, even Jeremiah Ellison. I don't mean to say that, like, even him, a person who's younger than me. I just mean that, Melina Abdullah, Patrice Cullors, Ijeoma Oluwo, all of these amazing people, I just want to literally name everyone. But, like, these are people who know their worth.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And that who really think.
Well, before we get to shout outs, this is the season finale of this show.
Final episode, yes.
But we don't stop existing as black men thinking thoughts and doing things during these times. So where can people find you before they see us again here?
You want to do my own plugs? Okay.
I want you to do your own plugs. I want to do mine too.
Where am I? I mean, obviously, I'm on Grace and Frankie on Netflix. I am also the host of a new show on Sci-Fi called The Great Debate, which Open Mike Eagle was on, talking nerd shit and being funny. And then also, besides that, I have a horror film that's on Shudder. That's part of an anthology film called Scare Package. And I'll be having phone calls with Open Mike Eagle, processing things.
Absolutely.
What about you, Mike? Where can people find you?
I mean, a big thing for me in starting these conversations and having them, makes me more excited for my most immediate next endeavor, which is starting my own podcast network, Stony Island Audio, of which, to let the cat out of a bag, Baron Vaughn is going to have a show or two on. But it's called Stony Island Audio. There's a podcast on it where I interview the legendary hip hop producer Prince Paul. And my own podcast, Secret Skin, is coming back as well. It's part of my network. So I get to talk to people there. So if you like the sound of me talking, it's a great place to go get more of that.
Yes. Well, fantastic, Mike. We're doing lots of stuff.
We are.
As the national anthem says, lift every voice and
sing. The only national anthem that counts.
The only national anthem. And also, as they said on Sopranos,
shout out to Blavity. Shout out to Funny or Die.